Welcome back to another video. My name is Waj and today we're doing another deep dive. This one is going to be on one of my favorite protocols around at the moment. It's called Protocol F of X. So without further ado, let's jump straight into it. Now, before we get started, there are a few things that we are going to cover. This is going to be a long video, as with all of my deep dives. So please sit back, relax, grab yourself a cup of tea or a cup of coffee, make some notes if you want to. Like you can see on screen right now, we've got tons of things that we want to cover today. So yeah, we're not going to waste any time. Let's just jump straight into it. So I think the first thing that we really need to talk about before we really get a good understanding of what Protocol F of X is are two main issues. The first one is the issue regarding stablecoins that we have in crypto today. Now, first of all, most of them are fiat backed. We know that with USDC, USDT, they're backed to the dollar, essentially fiat backed, I should say, pegged to the US dollar. Is this a problem? Well, in the long run, yes, it is. And you can see this very clearly if you look at this diagram over here, which basically shows you a chart highlighting the purchasing power of the US dollar over time. And you can see that gradually over time, this has depleted all the way down to where we are today. Purchasing power dropping massively over time. And the likelihood is that this is going to continue as we continue to print more dollars. The purchasing power is going to go down. And that's because of this concept of called inflation that we have today. Is there a way that we can potentially mitigate against some of this? Potentially, and we'll talk about how Protocol F of X can potentially do that when we move on to that. The other elements around stablecoins is that they're often centralized, like we've just mentioned with Tether and Circle. Sometimes have dubious backing. I think we saw that with the UST last cycle. Sometimes they're not really backed by a variety of assets. Sometimes they're not backed by any assets really whatsoever. So that is a problem. Often some of these stablecoins will have off-chain reserves, which is fine, but then they should have proof of reserves, and often we don't really have that. And I think there sometimes has been a little bit of uncertainty regarding the exact backing of some of these stablecoins, and that has often resulted in FUD, I should say, especially on crypto Twitter. There often isn't any kind of on-chain governance as well. I think the decisions are made by these centralized entities, and that kind of means that you, as a stakeholder in that particular stablecoin, doesn't really have too much to say regarding the direction that you'd like things to go. And lastly, I think the other element is revenue share. And I think this is something, one of the reasons why these stablecoin businesses have been so profitable. This is why Tether has been able to make billions of dollars of profit every quarter. They're able to arbitrage the difference between the monetary premium that you have between one USDT and one US Treasury or one Treasury bill, which is earning around that 5% mark at the moment. And because of that, they're able to arbitrage that difference and kind of make lots of revenue. However, none of that revenue is going directly to USDT or USDC holders for that matter. Now, I do know that there are some revenue sharing stablecoins around at the moment. We do have SFRAX, we do have SDI, we do have SUSDT. However, I think the vast majority of people don't really use these. The liquidity just isn't there at the moment. And most of the stablecoins that we have today don't have any sort of revenue share built into them. So those are just a number of issues that we have with stablecoins today. And in crypto, I should say. Don't get me wrong, there are a number of positives with stablecoins in crypto. One of my favorite things that we have in crypto today, one of the main product market fits that I think crypto has today. However, there are still some issues that we do need to solve. And we'll talk about how Protocol F of X is trying to solve some of these problems with their design as well. But before we get onto that, let's talk about the second issue, and that is the issue that we have with leverage. And the main thing is it costs a lot. It doesn't just cost, it costs a lot. Now, I've made 3 points about 3 different ways that you can actually get leverage in crypto today. This is particularly on-chain. We've got perpetual exchanges, we've got option protocols, and we've got looping via money markets. So let's talk about all 3 of them now. So perpetual exchanges, you can see from this image over here, I've taken this from GMX a while ago, and you can see that, for example, if you wanted to get a leverage long position on ETH, you can see that there is an open fee, there's a position price impact, there's an execution fee, there is an entry and exit fee, there is a borrow fee or funding rate as well. And there is a certain amount of liquidity there as well that you have to obviously pay attention to. This all adds up quite a lot. All these fees add up a lot. There's obviously the liquidation fee as well, which can be a big thing. It can be something that you have to worry about a little bit, especially if you move this slider across quite a lot. Now, one of the more costly fees comes from the funding rate itself, and the funding rate is essentially the way to keep perpetuals in line with their spot price. Now, the funding rate, especially in bull markets, can be really high. And we've seen this recently as we've seen the market kind of go up. We've seen the price of pretty much most altcoins go up massively. As a result, funding rates in order to kind of hold your long positions have been pretty high, at times high double digits, even at times triple digits. And obviously that costs quite a lot. That really does add up a lot. And I think that is one issue when it comes to leverage, is that, you know, definitely it is easy. Definitely there is liquidity that we have on chain now as well. You know, there's a variety of altcoins, a variety of platforms, which is all great. But it doesn't take away from the fact that it does still cost you quite a fair amount to kind of hold that leverage there if you wanted it. The second one is options. This is a picture that I took from Lyra a while ago when I was making these slides. Apologies, it has taken me a while. Now, the second problem that we have comes with options. And let's take a look at this picture. This is a picture that I took from Lyra a while ago in November. Sorry, it has taken me a while to make these slides and I have been a little bit slow with it. So that's my bad on that. But this is a picture that I took from Lyra. You can see that for those of you who don't know, Lyra is an on-chain options protocol. And when I was looking at this, the entire market, I should say, was fully utilized, meaning I couldn't even open a position. So I think limited liquidity is certainly a big problem that we have with options on chain at the moment. I would like to think that in due time that does change, and I think the entire option space as a whole should grow massively. It's something that I'm particularly bullish on. However, there are still issues with options, and the main ones being is that they are time dependent. So, you know, you do have to make your positions, they have expiry dates. You know, they're not going to last forever. And so what that means is that sometimes your options can expire worthless if you kind of miss out by, you know, a few weeks or something like that. So you kind of have to get your timing a little bit better when it comes to options. And like I said, there is liquidity issues there. However, they do have benefits in the sense that there's no funding rate and liquidation risk there. But there's still problems as well. And also, they can be expensive at times. And lastly, we have looping. And now I haven't got an image of looping for my presentation today, but I'm sure many of you watching are fairly familiar with money markets, the likes of Aave or any other kind of money market, where you basically lend an asset, let's say ETH, you borrow USDC against it, you take that USDC, you swap it out into ETH, you lend it again, you borrow more USDC, and you repeat the process as many times as you want to basically leverage your exposure to ETH. Now, at the same time, you are essentially going kind of short on USDC, which is fine because I don't think USDC is going to really change price too much, but you do have to worry about the borrow rates. And as you can imagine, in bull market conditions, borrow rates as we see today are in the double digits, which means you do have to pay for this. Secondly, there is a liquidation risk in the sense that if, let's say, you were doing that strategy with ETH price drops quite significantly in a short period of time, you know, potentially you could get liquidated, and that would be catastrophic. So with all three of these options, whether it's perpetual exchanges, option protocols, or even looping via money markets, there are fees, it does cost a lot, and there are issues with it in general. So all in all, we've talked about the issues with stablecoins that we have in crypto, and we've talked about the issues that we have with leverage in crypto, particularly on chain via these three different options. Let's talk about Protocol FXN and how Protocol FXN is trying to solve this. So, Protocol FXN, what is it? Well, it's a derivative protocol. It's built on Ethereum mainnet at the moment, and essentially it takes the asset ETH at the moment and splits it into two different assets, and it splits it into FETH, which we call fractional ETH, and XETH, which we call leveraged ETH. And you can think of this as kind of your stable coin or your stable asset, and XETH being your kind of leverage asset. And we'll talk about how it works in terms of mechanics and why it solves some of those problems that we've just talked about before. Now, in future, this doesn't just have to be ETH as the only product that they have. I'm sure they will have a variety of other assets in future that they will support, but this is a fairly new protocol, and for now, this is the asset that they have. These are just two memes that I did create when I were making some Twitter threads around both of them. I'll leave a link in the description below so you can kind of read those Twitter threads where I talked about both FETH and XETH, kind of how they work, and go into detail about that. So for those of you who like written content, go and check that out. But we'll talk about both of them now today anyway. So I think this image really helps to kind of give you a visual idea of how this works exactly. So let's take the asset ETH. You know, we've got one ETH. You take it into Protocol FXN and you can split it into this high volatility asset and this low volatility asset. So essentially you're taking one ETH and you're splitting it into two. Now the high volatility asset is called XETH and the low volatility is called FETH. But what are the actual fundamentals behind why you would want to do this? Well, firstly, if we take FETH, this is a stable asset, and intrinsically within its code, its price moves at 1/10 the price of ETH. So for example, if ETH were to move up 10%, FETH would only move up 1%. And for example, if ETH were to move down 10%, FETH would only move down 1%. So you can think of it as kind of like an asset that pretty much trades at the same price as ETH, but only at a fraction of 1/10. And that basically removes a significant amount of the volatility that you get with ETH. And essentially makes it somewhat of a stable asset. Now, of course, it's not exactly stable because, as you can imagine, ETH could go 200 or 300% up from here. And that would mean that FETH obviously goes up at 1/10 of that. So if, if ETH doubled in price, FETH would go up 10%, and likely on the downside, if let's say ETH drops 50%, FETH could drop 5%. However, the idea is that the big volatility that you get really gets dampened away from this, and you have an asset that is decentralized because it's backed by ETH. There isn't like any centralized or authority kind of running it. You do get revenue share, and we'll talk about how that works as well. And you're not fiat backed either. You're backed by ETH, which is different, and you don't have to worry the same way like you would with fiat backed assets with inflation, like you would, but you don't have to over here. And so FETH works like that. Of course, it's not entirely stable, but it's fairly stable for what it is. Now, you might be asking, what about the rest of the volatility here? So if 1/10 of the price action is going to FETH, what happens to the rest of that 9/10? The majority of this gets passed over to XETH. So XETH is the volatility asset. That is the high volatility asset, and essentially what it does is it takes the price of ETH, it moves as the price of ETH, but it also takes that additional 9/10 from FETH to basically give you that extra leverage. So it takes up the volatility from FETH, so it can range from 1x being, literally the base case, to extremely high leverage because it is able to take that 9/10 from FETH and bring it into itself. This is kind of what the charts look like. Again, I took these pictures a while back, so this data is not accurate as of today, but I think you'll see that FETH, if you go and have a look today, it's still going to be priced fairly similarly. It started off at $1. Of course, ETH has gone up in price, hence why FETH has gone up a little bit. But you can see XETH basically absorbs this extra volatility. Now, this volatility does change. It isn't a set amount, so it's not always going to be 1.84. It does depend on something called the collateral factor. We'll talk about that shortly as well. But you can see that because of this mechanic, you can basically buy XETH, and it's essentially your way to get leveraged ETH exposure without having to pay funding rate, without having to pay ongoing fees, without having entry and close fees or any of that sort of stuff, without having liquidation rate or risk or anything like that. So essentially, this is like a spot leveraged ETH asset, and I think for the reasons that we've talked about before, this can be a great way to kind of get exposure. So how does it actually work? Well, these assets are not exactly backed by ETH, rather they're backed by staked ETH, and at the moment they use Lido's STETH. And as a result, that means that there is some revenue generation happening in the background, because obviously ETH is earning that 3 to 4 to 5% yield, and obviously we can use that for a variety of things. So we'll talk about how that works as well. So essentially, you take your STETH and you can mint either FETH or XETH. It's entirely up to you. There are certain fees associated with minting, but remember, you don't have to actually mint these assets if you don't want to. You can just go on the open market and buy FETH or XETH as well if you wanted to. There are certain fees, and as I mentioned, this depends on what we call the collateral ratio. The collateral ratio being like how much STETH, how much of these assets are you minting against that original STETH. So you can see, have a look at this data here. You can see that in kind of normal modes, the fees aren't so bad. But we have this other concept called stability mode, and we'll talk about that shortly. But essentially, the point I want to make is that the fees aren't always going to be 0.25%. They will have slightly different fees from time to time. Now, remember, you can also redeem. So if you do have FETH or XETH, you can go to the redeem tab over here, and you can redeem it back for your STETH as well if you wanted to. So one of the questions that I think some of you may have is, what happens if just a ton of one of those assets are minted? Well, if it's the case of XETH, I don't think that's really a problem because of the way that this works. However, I think with FETH, we may have a little bit of a problem here, and we'll talk about kind of why that is. We do have something called the rebalance pool, and the rebalancing pool serves as this kind of yield generating vault for FETH. essentially taking some of that STETH yield and basically giving it to FETH holders. Now, what happens is should the quantity of FETH ever really exceed XETH by a significant margin, then the FETH that's in this rebalancing pool vault will automatically get converted into STETH to kind of balance it out again. Now, when necessary, the protocol redeems only the required amount of FETH to restore stability. And there's two important points to keep in mind. There is a 1-day waiting period, and also until it is claimed, the withdrawal requested FETH doesn't really earn any yield in that time period. So the TLDR is you can basically deposit FETH into this rebalancing pool to earn this STETH yield, but it may periodically dollar cost average into STETH over time. So what happens if the stability pool gets used up? Well, then we may have a problem, because now we've got a significant amount of FETH, but compared to XETH, not so much. Now, what we will have is XETH minting incentives, where some of the revenue earned from the treasury is used to fund a temporary incentive bonus to kind of mint XETH. I think you can see this from the fees if I go back here. So you can see this here. There will be like a 0% fee for minting, and there will probably be some bonuses if you were to do so. And the second way is the protocol will basically take the earned revenue from the treasury, use it to buy FETH, and then kind of redeem them for STETH from the reserve. And the protocol rebalancing is not quite as effective as minting XETH, but it has the advantage of the fact that it's immediately executable, and you don't really have to rely on market demand for XETH as well. So these are the ways that the protocol has to kind of keep things in check and to keep things balanced out. I think it's a good thing if more people mint XETH anyway. That basically helps to bring the leverage down a little bit. We really don't want to see like 20x leverage or stuff like that. I think that might be a little bit too degen, but I think especially when you have like a 1.5 to 3x leverage, I think things are generally in check there. So I think the main concern is really if FETH supply goes up significantly compared to XETH, and these are the ways that protocol FFX has to stop any particularly bad issues coming from that. So let's talk a little bit more about these F assets. Well, first of all, they are cross-chain. There is an integration with Layer 0 with the OFT token model, and so essentially you can take your FETH and you can bridge it to other chains. And at the moment, Arbitrum is supported, and I think this is great because I think some of us don't really enjoy the process of doing many transactions on ETH mainnet. I think rather we like to use L2s, particularly myself anyway. And so I think being on L2s kind of makes sense. There is a curve incentive at the moment that is on the Arbitrum curve pool as well. So you can go to Arbitrum curve, or curve on Arbitrum, I should say, and you can do your swaps there. It is also available on mainnet, of course. Recently, I did manage to help Protocol FFX integrate some of the assets with the time swap. For those of you who don't know, TimeSwap is an Oracle-less money market that's available on Arbitrum, and so you can do lots of really interesting strategies with this, including getting more leverage, including going short on leveraged ETH. There's lots of really cool things. I have talked about this on Twitter, so I'll leave a link in the description below to that as well, where you can read a little bit more about it. But I think the idea is, look, getting more use cases around these two assets is only going to make things better. You're gonna just increase demand that way, and that's ultimately what we want to see. We want to see more demand for these assets, because if there's more demand, then more fees, more revenue, because there's going to be more minting, and I think generally that's always good to see as well. And I think when we see novel, innovative products like this, I'm pretty excited because the scope of what you can do with them is just really cool. Let's talk about some of the metrics here. So as you can see, TVL has been doing really well, up only. I think it's still fairly small in the grand scheme of things, but I'd like to see this get to 50 million, 100 million, especially as we get more into this bull market. And I think a lot of it will depend on kind of price appreciation of ETH itself. But I think generally, if we can continue to increase this, even if ETH doesn't go up, I think that would be a great thing. And I think one of the ways that we're going to be able to do this, Protocol FFX is going to be able to do this, is by not only adding ETH, but also a variety of other assets that we have this kind of stable asset and this leverage asset on as well. This is a little bit more up to date in terms of recent metrics. I believe I took this maybe 5 days ago or something like that. So by the time you're watching this, it should be a little bit more recent than the graphics I've shown before. But essentially, we've got a TVL of just around 17 million. It should be more, hopefully, by the time you're watching this, but that counts to almost 7,000 ETH. You can see the collateral ratio that we have at the moment in terms of backed asset values, so the ST ETH against the FETH supply, which is healthy at the moment, which is good. And we can see, look, FETH has been fairly stable. XETH currently has a 1.69 leverage, and you can see that how that has changed over time. So its price has changed over time quite significantly, and you can see that the kind of return that you would have got here, which is pretty nice to see. The rebalance pool that we talked about as well, where you can drop FETH in and will auto convert into STETH if collateral ratio issues do occur, is paying really nicely. So imagine on your stable asset earning 38% APR, really nice. Of course, some of this is subsidized with the FXN token, which is the native governance token for the protocol, which we're going to talk about as well shortly. Now, some metrics that I did find was that the FETH holders are still fairly small, only 67 holders on ETH mainnet. I don't think that's really that much. I would like to see more people use these sorts of assets, but I think we will see this over time, especially with more integrations on layer 2s, more liquidity on layer 2s, and also kind of more things to do as well, rather than just kind of the one curve pool that we have. If there are more things that we can do, like money markets or innovative strategies, using them to buy things or using across DeFi, then I think we should see this increase over time. XETH certainly has a lot more usage. I think part of it being is that we are in what some say is a bull market, and therefore I think if ETH price is going up, then people want to get leverage naturally, especially if you don't have to pay for it. So we're seeing a lot more usage of XETH, I should say, which is good to see. Now, in terms of liquidity, we've got a reasonable amount. We can see on most of it is on Curve, by the way, on both ETH mainnet and on Arbitrum. We have around 1 million TVL for the XETH ETH pool. I think FETH is basically in a variety of other sub pools, including paired with Frax and CRV USD. There is also an FETH, XETH, and ETH pool on Arbitrum, which has around 200 or 300,000 TVL. Ultimately, we don't have the most liquidity at the moment, but there is still some very, very good double-digit yields that you can earn from both of them. I think generally this is something that will just gradually increase over time as people are more accustomed to these assets, they're educated on them, and they know some of the strategies that you can do to make some income on them. So that's always good to see. But I think for now, I think liquidity is still fairly low. That we see right now, and some of it is fragmented across a variety of pools, which does give you some pretty big price impact if you were to trade with size. Let's talk about the FXN token. It is the governance token for the protocol and also has revenue share. Those are the kind of two functions of FXN. We'll talk about how that works in a little bit more detail. There's a total supply of around 20 million with a circulating of only around 50,000 tokens. So ultimately that means we've got quite a low market cap and still fairly low FTV as well, of less than 100 million. This is what the price chart looks like for those of you who are interested. I'm not particularly going to focus on that because I don't know if things are going to go up or down. You know, this is crypto, isn't it? But what I can show you is how some of the tokens are being distributed. So around half of them going as liquidity incentives, which are basically paving the way for more adoption because those yields are pretty juicy at the moment. But you can also see that the Aladdin DAO, which are a team behind this, are getting around 30%. There was a few airdrops as well, and community contributors, which hopefully I can potentially get some as well by making this video, for example. We'll talk about that as well shortly. So you can see how they're vested as well. Feel free to pause the video and read them in a bit more detail if you want. The FXN token, what you can do with it is that you can, they have the same model as Curve with the VE tokenomic model, where you can lock your FXN up to 4 years, and this will give you VE FXN. Now, the amount of VE FXN you get depends on how long you lock for. If you lock for the maximum 4 years, you'll get a 1-to-1 ratio, whereas if you lock for just 1 year, you'll get 1 FXN into 0.25 VE FXN. Now, currently, the yield in doing so is around 12%. Which is really good, and this is essentially how the revenue generation works. So you've got to have VE FXN to get this revenue. 75% of the treasury revenue actually goes to VE FXN holders, which is really good to see. And you can see that at the moment, quite a lot of the supply is actually locked up if we take a look at this, with the average of 3.25 years average lock as well, which is really nice to see. A lot of people are locking, a lot of people want the revenue, and that seems to work well. Now, here is the kind of a visualization of how this goes over time. We are in the very early days still, so I believe we're probably like month 6, month 7, something like that. And you can see generally over time how this will increase, and we will have a higher circulating market cap than what we do right now. So perhaps I'm slightly wrong on this data over here. I will have to just double check that, because that doesn't really match up to here. So apologies for that. I'll try and clarify that and tell you exactly what it is. The other important element regarding tokenomics is the fact that there is a little bit of FXN wars, I should say. Convex themselves have decided to basically integrate FFX as part of their protocol, and they kind of want to accumulate as much FXN as possible for their governance power. And so what you can do is you can basically take your FXN, and they'll give you a liquid wrapper called CVX FXN. This might not trade at a peg, which is important to know, but ultimately that gives Convex governance power and revenue going forward as well. So yeah, Convex are certainly playing the FFX wars. Looking at the team is really cool to see, because honestly, this is probably one of the best communities and teams that I've seen in a long time. The Aladdin DAO. Now, they do have a variety of other protocols, Concentrator and Cleaver, which I won't talk about today. Perhaps in another video, if you guys are interested, I could do a video covering all 3 of them. So this is their 3rd product. All 3 do have different tokens as well. But the team on FFX are really, really lovely people. And I've been very fortunate to create some good friendships with some of these people. So I'll try and remove my bias as much as possible, but these are all really good people. Kmetz, Paul, Kruger, Charlene, CryptoVesta, who's been very good at educating the community on this. There's Gary Chiaki, who I believe is one of the engineers, and Shane. Now, the one thing that I really like about Protocol FFX is it goes a lot more than beyond just the team. The community plays a really crucial role in not only just educating, but getting the word out there about these amazing assets. And I've just written a few of the amazing names that we have. So CryptoGrills, IW, Cyril, MetaCVX, The Bit Research, who do some great research, Aero, CurveCap, the Llama NFTs, and many, many more, including the A team, which has a variety of people in there, including Crypto Profit and D Advisor. These people have all played a really crucial role in getting the community onboarded, and I think you don't really see that too often in some of your favorite DeFi protocols. But I think these are just some of the names that I do recommend following and really checking out, because they have some great research. Now, one of the things that FFX do is that they have this booster program, and this is essentially a way to incentivize people in the community to create education, to essentially get the word out there, do podcasts, do content, do videos like I'm doing right now, and the idea is that some of these tokens get distributed to these people. So you could say that I am shilling a little bit right here, because you can see that I am actually on this list. Currently, I don't have any votes towards my name, but hopefully if you're watching this video whilst the vote is going on, or whilst future votes are going on in the near future, you may appreciate some of the content that I've done and vote for me. So, yeah, if you vote for me, cool. If you don't, just vote for some of these other guys, because they're all really good people as well. But I think it's great because it helps to incentivize the community members. It's done it really well, and 3% of the total supply will go towards these community members who have helped support with content creation, education, engagement, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, really, really good to see. Now, what's next? I think one of the most highly anticipated launches is the stablecoin FUSD, and the results are in. There was a vote around a month ago where they wanted to basically add a second 2-asset pool having this FUSD asset. Now, the details of exactly what shape and format this is going to come in are still a little bit unknown, I should say. However, you can go to the Protocol FFX Discord, and you can see a lot of discussions going on around how this is going to be done. But essentially, it's going to be backed by STEs with a built-in yield derived by the LSDs in the reserve. The idea is going to try and be scalable, have a reliable peg in both directions, and kind of have zero real-world asset exposure, but collateralized by these ETH LSDs. So we'll have to wait and see exactly what the mechanics around this are going to be like. But hopefully we will see this in the coming weeks or months, where we have this completely stable asset. So we have, not only do we have the leverage asset, not only do we have the stable asset, but we also have this kind of stable coin in place. I did originally have double thoughts around kind of why we were doing this. One of my concerns were really, are we going to dilute the ETH kind of pools and assets? Are we kind of going to, is it going to stagnate the growth? I think that was one thing that I was particularly worried about. And for me, one of the things that I was thinking was that really we should be focusing on the leverage asset and the kind of stable asset, and increasing their composability within DeFi before kind of moving on to increasing other assets. However, the community did want this. I'm still excited to see how this will look. I do kind of believe in the team and what they are building at the moment. So let's see. But yeah, I'll be honest, I did vote against this, but let's see what happens. I'm curious to see kind of what format it'll take. So yeah, that's coming next. And I think in future we probably will see a variety of other assets with this 2-token model. Potentially some of your favorite altcoins, maybe because of the close connection with Curve and Convex, that we see like a leveraged CRV asset and a stable CRV asset. I think we'll have to wait and see. But I think the possibilities are pretty endless here. So just to end things off, as always, we like to talk about the bull and bear case. So I think the bull case is pretty clear to me. We've got novel mechanics introducing native leverage into a token without the real risk of funding rates, leverage, and things like that. And I think so far it's proven to work really well. We already have stability mechanisms in place with reserve pools for emergencies that are building. And I think if the correct money Legos are built, then kind of creating that demand for FETH and XETH assets will increase, and I think that will end up leading to more protocol revenue. They're already thinking about cross-chain, especially being on Arbitrum now, and thankfully community members have been able to help with introducing these assets into other protocols, creating new strategies. I think we've got a very, very strong community with all the different boosters around, and yeah, I think generally the bull case is pretty clear to me. We're still at a fairly low market cap compared to other competitors, and this is a product or a protocol that is already earning a real revenue. So I think that's really good to see. The bear case does have a few things. I think one of the questions is, does FXN generate enough revenue to validate a 100 million FTV? That is a question that some people have. One of the concerns that I had was that the number of holders for both FETH and XETH is still fairly low. I do think that with time, the adoption will increase, especially on layer 2s. But I think one of the issues is that we really have to figure out is the liquidity, especially on layer 2s, is quite poor at the moment. That is something that I think we have to fix. And I think potentially creating a new pool altogether that doesn't, because at the moment what we have on Arbitrum is an FETH, XETH and ETH pool. I think sometimes that might not be the right way to go about it, and so potentially I think having maybe an FETH and a stable asset pool, or maybe an XETH and an ETH pool, might be a little bit better. But I think in general, look, anyone can create a pool, so it's not up to the team to do that, it's up to anyone if they want to do that. So I think that's something that I think we probably need to work on. And I think if we do that, and of course increase the integrations with these assets across these different chains or across Arbitrum, for example, then I think we will see significantly more adoption for these assets. One of the questions that I have is kind of what happens if Lido falls, because I think at the moment the whole protocol is basically based on Lido working well. I mean, I think the risk of this is fairly low, but it is still something, it's not, I wouldn't say it's zero. It's not a 0% chance. And also, I think we have to kind of think about how we want to avoid liquidity fragmentation. I think that's the last thing that we want to do with like 100 different pools, all with like 10,000 TVL. That's definitely not what we want. We want to have very concentrated pools with high liquidity so that people can kind of come in and come out as they choose. They don't have to always mint and redeem. And I think that would be great to see. Now, token emissions are also another thing. We have a low market cap and a high FTV. Are people going to dump? I mean, like I said, I don't know too much about what people are going to do, but I think it is something that you should pay attention to. And as I mentioned, we've had fairly poor liquidity on Arbitrum, but I think also the reserve pool balance is still fairly low for now. And I think we hopefully will see that grow with time, but I would like to see that grow just so we've got a little bit more in the reserve just for those emergencies. So all in all, I am a massive fan of Protocol FFX. I love the idea of having both FETH and XETH, the idea that I can get native leverage, spot leverage without having to pay funding rates, without having to worry about liquidation, without having to worry about all those fees, and also FETH being kind of a replacement for your dollar pegged, fiat backed or fiat pegged stablecoins. I think they're great. I love the idea that we're kind of getting more integrations, especially on Arbitrum with TimeSwap and some of these other different protocols, hopefully in the near future. I can't fault them. They've managed to achieve so much in just a matter of just a few months. However, it is an important thing that I should say is that a lot of work still needs to be done. This is by no means a finished product, but I'm definitely a fan and I'm definitely happy to help them wherever I can. So yeah, that's all I wanted to cover today. Just a fairly quick, I say quick, this probably has been around 30 minutes long, deep dive on Protocol FFX, so that if you're a complete beginner, you kind of get a good idea of what's going on here and how the protocol works. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. If you're watching this on Twitter, give it a like, give it a retweet. If you're watching this on YouTube, drop a comment down below. Let me know your thoughts and what you'd like to see next on the channel. Smash the like button, subscribe to the channel, and we'll be back with plenty more content in the near future.